Okay, well, welcome to the Old Classic Car channel. Today's brochure review is for the mid-1950s Standard 8 saloon, or in particular the Standard Super 8 and Family 8. This particular brochure dates to November 1955, but the Standard 8 name can trace its way all the way back to 1938 with the Flying 8. That particular car was produced until 1941, then continued in production after the war until 1948. The new version of the 8 came along in 1953, was priced at £481 including purchase tax. And I mean, this is, like I said, this is 1955, so it's sort of mid-production if you like. The very first cars were pretty basic machines with sliding windows, just a single windscreen wiper, no external boot lid. Wind-up windows would come along in 1954 with the deluxe model, and would be standard across the range in 1955 onwards. But anyone wanting an opening boot would either have to have a standard 10 or hang on until the Gold Star 8 of 1957. So like I say, this is like a mid-production version of the car. And I've always thought that the standard 8s and the 10s were fairly underrated cars. Like I said, these came out in 1953, and I've always thought, especially when they got the opening boot lid, they were a much more practical and usable car compared to, say, the Austin A30. Just as one example, the A30 has a much smaller bonnet opening around here, and it makes access to the A-Series engine, even though it's exactly the same size at 803cc, much more difficult, whereas the standard has a proper full-size car bonnet, if you like, and makes accessibility a whole lot easier. Like I say, this particular brochure dates to 1955, and the 8 was sold alongside the 10 as a slightly more basic version. If we have a look inside, we can just see a little bit more about the car. The Standard 8 models represent a major achievement in the realms of popular motoring, now known as the Family 8 and Super 8 saloons. They include in their equipment wind-up windows, no-draft ventilation, trim door panels, press-button door handles, and self-cancelling flashing type direction indicators. 2 screen wiper blades, not 2 speed, but just 2 screen wiper blades, and hub cover plates, in other words hubcaps. Like I say, they make reference to the self-cancelling flashing type direction indicators because semaphore indicators were still pretty commonplace at the time, and also the wind-up windows because, like I say, prior to 1954, you had to make do with the sliding windows, which was a little bit utilitarian, it has to be said. Then we've got a picture of the fascia, or the dashboard. So it says one 5-inch instrument dial in front of the driver, contains a speedometer with trip mileage, fuel gauge, ignition, oil pressure and headlamp high beam warning lights. The dial is cowled to prevent reflection on the screen. The horn button is in the centre of the steering wheel boss. The controls are central group buttons below the parcel shelf for the starter, choke control, head and side lamps and screen wipers. And alongside is the control for the built-in air conditioning unit, which is standard equipment on the Super 8. Provision is also made for the inclusion as an extra of a radio as illustrated. All exciting stuff. And to be honest, I've always thought these were quite nice little cars. I ran a standard Super 10 and a companion estate myself a few years ago, and I always thought they drove really nicely. I think they're very underrated cars, to be honest. And I much prefer it to the A30, even though it's not quite as cute looking as an A30 with its standard 3-box dumpy styling. It just struck me as a better car overall. The access to the rear seats is better compared to the A30 and the A35. It drove better. I wouldn't say it handled as directly as a Mini or a Morris Minor. I mean, the Morris Minor and the Hillman Minx, cars like that were rivals back in the day of the Standard 8. But it was a very direct, quite a chuckable little car, and I've always had a soft spot for them, to be honest. So let's see what else it says. The roomy, all-steel body provides seating for 4 adults, while the 4 wide doors give comfortable entrance and exit. The amount of luggage storage space is quite unique and is completely dust and rainproof. And the reason it's dust and rainproof was because there was no exterior boot lid. You had to go in through the split rear seats, which they made bonus of by saying you could fold the seats down doubly or individually for extra storage space, which was good in its way, but the access was somewhat compromised, a bit like on an Austin Healey Sprite, the Mark 1. You had to go in through the inside of the car to get at the luggage in the boot. So it says the Standard 8 will be found to be ideal for parking in difficult and confined spaces, and although the seating and luggage room is so generous, the overall size of the car leaves plenty of room in a normal garage. The unitary construction of body and chassis is the secret to its low weight and rigid strength, which contributes so much to the economical running and superb performance. The steering is positive and light, and hydraulic brakes easy to operate, and hydraulic controlled clutch smooth yet efficient. All features of the Standard 8 which make this family car safe and a pleasure to drive. You know, when people were still used to cars that were fairly antiquated in the mid-50s, there was still plenty of pre-war cars lurching along in the days before the 10-year test, or the MOT as it became to be known. So a little car like this with all these features, with the option of a heater and a radio, it was quite a revelation, really. So let's see what we've got over the page. There's a picture of the interior. The fully trimmed interior of the standard Super 8 saloon is designed for maximum comfort. The upholstery is vinide with ivory piping, and the 4 wide doors are fitted with fully pivoted, no draft ventilators. There are parcel shelves in the fascia and pockets in both front doors. The interior light operates as the doors are opened. There are twin sun visors, twin screen wipers, trip mileage indicator, heater and air conditioning unit. The tools and tool roll are included in the Super 8 equipment. Room for the family and their luggage too. Of course, not forgetting that a couple of years later you'd have the option of Overdrive Gearbox as well for the Standard 8, which was quite a revelation. The engine is a 803cc 4-cylinder engine, ironically the same exact size as the A30's engine, and it would go on in later years to sort of be enlarged and used in the Herald and the Triumph Spitfire and so on until about 1980. So it was a good engine. I always liked it, and it was quite smooth for its size, pretty reliable as much as they can be, and yeah, it drove very well. So here we go. Here's a picture of a left-hand drive. The gentleman and his young lady sat next to him, and it's illustrating the amount of luggage space there was through the use of the folding rear seat. There we go. The completely water and dust-proof luggage boot is more than adequate for most normal purposes. But as the illustration shows, with the 2 front seats occupied and the rear seats folded and tipped forward, the available luggage space is doubled. Access is through the rear doors, and with the folding rear seats makes all the luggage completely accessible, because the Standard 8, this era of Standard 8, was only ever sold as a 4-door saloon. There was never a 2-door saloon, and there was never an estate version. If you wanted the estate version, then you'd have to get the 10 and the companion, as it was called, but the 8 was only ever available as a 3-box 4-door saloon. The Standard 8 family saloon ensures stability, comfort and safety for its occupants under any road conditions. The suspension has been tested to its utmost limits on the Motor Industry Research Association's proving ground. It gives an extremely comfortable ride, and even when fully loaded, cornering is exceptionally good. The spare wheel is housed in a separate locker, accessible from outside of the car. Let's have a flick over now. I do love the illustrations in these old brochures. They're just, I love the colours of them. I'm not sure if brochures are still even made anymore for cars, but this sort of era, I just think the artwork is great in them. I mean, just fantastic. So let's have a quick flick forwards, and then we've got a picture of the engine itself. And it has to be borne in mind that a lot of people are still used to old side valve engines, and Ford was still fitting their cars with side valve engines and 3-speed gearboxes in the 1950s, whereas Standard had this all new 4-cylinder engine on offer. And like I say, it went on in use in the Spitfire until about 1980 or so. So it says 4-cylinder 803cc overhead valve engine with 4-speed gearbox has been designed to ensure maximum power and speed combined with economical running. A petrol consumption of 40 to 50 miles per gallon depending upon driving conditions, and a top speed in excess of 60 miles per hour. A high power to weight ratio, acceleration that is all that could be wished for, combined to give the 8 an excellent all-round performance. Lively, dependable and economical. The distributor is situated in the most accessible position and incorporates both automatic centrifugal advance and retard mechanism and the vacuum control, which ensures correct ignition timing under all conditions. Again, because a lot of people would have been used to pre-war cars at this time where you'd manually adjust the advance and retard and so on. So features like that were quite important, even though you can't imagine sort of sales brochures and online configurators getting into this much detail about the technology under the bonnet. In those days, when people are a lot more hands-on with working on cars, this was all important stuff. The cooling system is by pump and is thermostatically controlled, and carburation is by downdraft carburetor, and a bypass oil cleaner is fitted, which is easily changed when necessary. There it is, the old canister type filter on the side there, which wasn't too bad to get at. And what else have we got? The radiator filler, the oil filler, the fluid reservoirs for the hydraulically operated brakes and clutch, battery, etc. are all immediately accessible for servicing beneath the fully opening bonnet. Like I said before, the accessibility on these was leagues ahead of the A30 in my opinion. I've run both over the years, and like I say, I'd happily have another standard 8 or a 10 again, because I think they're great little cars and ably supported by the Standard Motor Club, which, although I'm not a member now, I was back in the day when I ran my Super 10, and I can well recommend it. On this page we have the specifications with the dimensions, interior dimensions and so on. There's it all in there, so if there's anything in there you can probably stop and have a closer look. So that is the brochure issued by the Standard Motor Company Limited of Coventry in 1955. And on the rear we have a picture of the Family 8 saloon, so that compares with the front cover, which is the Super 8, which, I mean, there aren't a huge number of differences, but I think all these quarter lights opened on the Super 8, and it's got chrome overriders, whereas the Family 8's the more basic model, no overriders, and I think only the front quarter lights opened, but they still had hubcaps, they still had chrome bumpers, so the visual differences were not all that great, and you'd have to really know your little standards to spot the difference if you saw these things driving along and you had your I Spy book and you were trying to record what you were seeing. So yeah, that was the Standard 8, Super 8 and the Family 8 of 1955. Like I said, it came out in 1953 and continued in production until 1959, when it was replaced by the Triumph Herald, which was an all new design but used the same engine enlarged to 948cc. A very different car to the Herald in many respects. I mean, this was all unitary construction, and the Herald, it reverted back to a separate chassis and all the panels sort of bolting on, which offered a great deal of flexibility in terms of the body styles that the company could offer. But they always struck me as being a bit more rattly on rough surfaces, the Heralds and Spitfires and things, so if I was going to get a small 50s saloon, I would probably go for one of these. So I hope this was of interest. I have got a brochure for the Standard 10 as well, which I will be having a look at shortly. But this was the review of the brochure for the 1955 Standard 8. And thanks for watching.